Hello everyone, this is Felix Collins, and we're going to spend the next 12 days in Taiwan. Let's go. So after a long day of travel with 3 connecting flights, I finally made it to Taipei, and figuring out how easy it was to get public transportation made me realize that this was going to be a promising trip. I grabbed a Metro card at the airport for 345 Taiwanese NT, which included 100 NT dollars in credit, and I took the train for 12 stops to Taipei main station. It didn't take too long to realize that the Metro card is a must-have, as it not only works on the regional rails, but also on the buses and the U-bike rentals throughout the country. Just keep in mind that you need a Taiwanese phone number to be able to use the e-bikes. You may want to consider getting a regular SIM card instead of an eSIM, but I'm not your mom. I'm not going to tell you what to do. After dropping my stuff off, I did what any reasonable person with jet lag would do. I went to meet with a friend, grab a beer, which resulted in me missing the last train, so I walked 4 hours back to where I was staying. We're off to a great start. The first morning I just walked around and explored, and one of the first stops was to Ann Forest Park, which was recommended to me, but honestly I found it a bit underwhelming. However, it was insanely hot out, so that probably played a part.
You are.
I know, I'm drenched. It is sweaty. I'm hot.
Look at me and look at you.
I'm very, very sweaty. It is very hot.
How is this so different?
Because
We're both humans.
Yeah, and you live in this climate. You're from this climate. I needed a place to cool down, so I figured we'd check out Taiwan's beer scene. Went over to Taihu Brewing, and I gotta say, I was impressed. There's a laid-back tap room upstairs, and an excellent bar downstairs. And the beer was definitely worth it.
This is a brewery called Taihu Brewing. It's very popular. During the weekend, on a Friday or a Saturday night, if you come here without reservation, you won't be able to get a table. It's fully packed in the first floor and in the basement downstairs.
The rest of the day I just kept exploring and didn't check out too many sites. I went to a couple of night markets, all of which were packed, and there's plenty of videos on that, so I won't go into too much detail. But there's plenty of food and games. After that I topped off the night at Jolly Brewing, which wasn't that impressive. It was more of a restaurant, but made for a good rest stop. After catching up on some much needed sleep, I was fresh and ready to check out some spots. The first stop on that list was the Kai-Shek Memorial. We're now at Kai-Shek Memorial Hall. Obviously, somewhat controversial but very important figure for Taiwan's history. He fought in a civil war against the communists. Then they united during Japanese occupation in World War II. After Japan's defeat, civil war continued. Kai-Shek lost. He brought his forces here. Now, while he was here, a lot of people say that he ruled as a dictator. It's kind of up in the air, but obviously really, really important to Taiwan's history and culture, and you'll see him on the money. You see him just kind of all over the place. So, and his KMT party is still in power right now. After grabbing a bite to eat, I went to Taipei 101, as it's a must-see if you're here. It's an incredible piece of architecture with incredible views of the city. Another location that's really worth checking out, and I'm glad I did, is the Taipei 101 building, which you can see right over here behind me. Now, it is one of the largest buildings in the world. From 2004 to 2011, it was the largest building. I'm sorry, it was 2004 to 2009, it was the largest building in the world. Now it is the 11th largest building. However, it's still an absolute engineering marvel. It has a number of really interesting features. Taiwan isn't a stranger to earthquakes and typhoons, so one of the things that they had to put in there is something called a mass tune dampener, which there's only about 3 or 4 of those in the world in buildings. And what it basically does is it's a large metal ball that's suspended from 8 steel cables, and it helps shift the weight of the building when it comes into contact with either earthquakes or high force winds that you would get in a typhoon. So they had to really build that to keep the building stable and safe. It also has an elevator that goes from the 5th floor up to the 89th floor in the span of about 57 seconds. You do feel the pressure difference when you're going up. In the elevator, they do tell you to swallow both up and down. It helps equalize the pressure within your body. Either way, you're still going to feel it, but you adjust pretty quickly. You have some really, really amazing views from up top. And unfortunately, you can't get up to the 101st floor unless you are a foreign diplomat of some sort, or you manage to spend over $1 million Taiwanese dollars at the mall, which is roughly 30,000 US dollars. However, the 90th floor, the observation deck, all of it, totally worth it. The price for a ticket to get up there is about 600 Taiwanese dollars. If you are a Taiwanese resident or you have a Taiwanese ID card, it's closer to 400. Totally worth checking out. Great views.
After Taipei 101, I needed to find a few specific supplies for a project that I was working on, so on a recommendation, I headed over to the Xiamen shopping district. This may come as a recommendation, so all I can say, it's really just a typical shopping district filled with street performers, lots of stores from high fashion to little knickknacks, tattoo parlors, food, and some pretty cool street art. I actually really like the street art. Nothing really stands out, but it's still a pretty decent area to check out if you want to go shopping for a souvenir, grab a bite to eat, or just walking around. I'll definitely be coming back so I can pick up some souvenirs. Jolly Brewing is also pretty close by, as well as 228 Peace Park, which hosts a bunch of neat little public art displays, buildings, a theater, and some other stuff. It's fun both day and night. At this point in time, it was beer 30, and I wanted to find somewhere to catch a nice sunset, so with this in mind, I made my way over to Pier 5. Even on a weeknight, Pier 5 gets pretty full pretty fast, so it's a bit harder to find a seat on one of the rooftops. But if you manage to grab a seat at the right time, you'll be able to catch a really nice sunset. There's plenty of beer and there's also lots of food. There's pretty much something for everyone. After a few more beers, I made my way back to my hostel and caught up on some sleep. The next day I went up to Beitou, which is about an hour north, so that I could check out the hot springs. They have a nice little old train station turned mini museum, and as you make your way up to the hot springs, you'll pass by a Taiwanese Aboriginal museum, which is sure to spark some intrigue into Taiwanese Aboriginal culture and art.
This is a tattooed man that's covered in tattoo all over his body. In the 16th century, when the Dutch came to Taiwan and saw this tattooed man, they probably want to study him. They just kidnapped him and shipped him back to Netherlands.
The Aboriginal Museum was a pleasant, quick little stop, but that's not what I came here for. It was time to check out one of the thermal hot springs.
The ancient people, or I think the Aborigines, that lives in this mountain, they thought this place has smoke coming out because there's a witch that lives here.
Oh, wow. That is toasty.
Hot, huh?
That's toasty.
The Thermal Valley is part of the Tainan volcanic group, and the volcanic heat mixed with the water causes the water to reach temperatures of 90 degrees Celsius, or 194 degrees Fahrenheit. The water was hot enough that it was common practice for people to boil eggs in the water. However, the thermal springs also contain trace elements of radioactive radium, so it's probably for the best that people don't use it. The combination of radium and sulfate causes the water to have a green jade color, and when it crystallizes, it creates something called Beitou stone, which can only be found here and in another hot spring in Akita, Japan. After exploring the area a little bit more, I made my way back to Taipei proper and found myself grabbing a beer at Mikkeller, a world-famous Danish brewery with a location here in Taipei.
Alright, next stop on the list is Mikkeller. This is actually a Danish brewery, but they do have a few spots here in Asia, notably South Korea and Japan. I haven't had a chance to check them out in those places, but we're going to go check them out here in Taiwan and see how it compares to the one in Denmark. I absolutely love the place in Denmark. They're known for having a lot of guest beers, and they make some pretty good stuff themselves.
This particular location didn't disappoint. They had a spacious room upstairs as well as a pretty lively bar on the downstairs. With a great beer selection and awesome staff, this is definitely a spot to check out. And it's located right around the corner from another tap room called Jim and Dad's, where I met a great group of people. I was planning on getting out of Taipei to explore more of the country, so I started asking for recommendations of where I should visit. And the same place kept coming up again and again.
Outside of Taipei, where should everyone go?
I would recommend Tainan country.
Tainan country?
Tainan country because we have original Taiwan history in there.
So, with multiple people recommending Tainan, I caught a high-speed rail and made my way south. I made it to Tainan with a few hours of daylight left to spare. The first thing I noticed was that it was less walkable than Taipei, and the public transportation was certainly lacking. Nevertheless, I hit the ground running and went straight to my first spot, the old Confucius Temple.
Behind me we have the Tainan Confucius Temple. It was built in 1665. It is Taiwan's oldest higher institute of education. In World War II, it was completely destroyed and bombed by the US. It was reconstructed to look the same way that it did in 1917 when it was under Japanese occupation. So let's go ahead and check it out.
The temple itself is a quick trip, but a really cool area to explore. You can walk around the temple in about 15 minutes and explore the surrounding gardens with a nice walk up the tower if you don't mind the tight spaces. After leaving here, I headed over to the old department store, which has lots of cool history and shopping available.
So behind me we have the Haiyashi department store. It was built in 1932. It was built by the Japanese during the occupation. After the war, the owner went back to Japan and the store was closed and everyone kind of forgot about it. In 2013, the building was restored, and in 2014, it reopened as a department store that sells a lot of Haiyashi goods. It's a really, really busy place. There's a nice little Shinto shrine on top. You can see evidence of bombs from World War II that the US dropped on the building. Now, most of the stuff has been restored, but on the top floor you can see holes. There's also a nice big Shinto shrine up there, so let's go check it out.
I didn't have a lot of time to stay in Tainan, so I made sure to do what I do best and check out the beer scene. Unfortunately, there's only one brewery in Tainan, Sparrow Brewing. It was a nice small place, and the friendly owner was happy to tell me about how he got into being the only brewery in the city.
And what was your name? Jonah? What inspired you to open a brewery? You're an alcoholic. I like the honesty. Where did you learn to brew beer?
On YouTube.
On YouTube? Really? So no school or anything?
No, we don't have a school in Taiwan.
And what is your favorite beer?
I think IPA or lager.
IPA or lager? The single IPA or
Single IPA is best.
single IPA? And which
Famous in our shop.
that's the most popular?
Yeah.
And which is the most popular lager?
I think Tainan beer is popular.
Tainan? Okay. We are leaving Sparrow Brewing. Really, really cool owner, self-taught, only brewery here in Tainan. Worth checking out. I'm really, really impressed by what he's done. It's a tiny little place.
Next on the list was We Drink Beer Tap Room, which is located on the Old Street. This is definitely an area worth checking out. It looks great during the day and night, but I highly recommend checking it out at night. The lights and lanterns are something out of a book, and it made for a great walk. We Drink Beer Company only has 4 beers on tap and a large selection of bottles. It's definitely one of the most hipster places I've been to, but it's a great open seating atmosphere where you're sure to strike up a conversation. Here's where I met my friend Kyle, who's going to show up later when we get to Kaohsiung, but more on that later. The next morning I sat outside for breakfast and was surprised to see some old F-5 fighter jets flying over, which was an interesting surprise. I finished eating and made my way over to the Anping district, which is full of history. First stop on the list was Fort Zeelandia.
Now we're at Fort Zeelandia, also known as Fort Anping. It's also gone through some other names like Fort Orange. It was built by the Dutch originally. They started building in 1624, finished construction in 1634. They were under a constant attack from locals and Chinese. Eventually the Chinese ended up kicking them out in 1661. At the time, the Dutch were trying to establish themselves as the dominant traders in the region. Archaeologists have dug up some of the original structures. The original structures were built with sugar, sand, and like seashells or something like that. I can't quite remember. Entry to this place is 70 new Taiwanese dollars, so that's about $2. Pretty quick stop if you want to come up to Anping. There's a lot of stuff to do around here. Don't need to spend a lot of time.
Unfortunately, my time here in Tainan was short. However, I still managed to make it over to the Anping treehouse, which was definitely my favorite spot.
So now we're at the Anping treehouse. It's actually an old warehouse that became overgrown with banyan trees. It was originally built by the Japanese, and then the Taiwan Salt Company used it as a storage warehouse. Eventually the building was abandoned and it became overgrown with all these banyan trees. Now, because it's been overgrown, you can hear all the birds chirping. There's like squirrels running around. There's a nice little pond with some fish. Really, really cool area. Temperature wise, it's also much, much cooler here than it is outside. I have to say this is probably one of my favorite places I've seen since I've been in Tainan.
There's some salt flats in the area and a green tunnel boat tour, which I didn't have a chance to check out, but I'll have to add it to my list for next time. Next morning was time to head off to Kaohsiung. I hopped on a train and I was on my way. It was a short train ride from Tainan to Kaohsiung, and I checked into my hotel before grabbing a bite to eat at one of the best ramen places I've ever been to, Kui Du Ru. I had plans to go see the Dragon and Tiger Pagoda, as it's apparently one of the highlights here, but unfortunately it was undergoing renovations, so I had to make other plans. I found an amazing rail system that circles around the city, and I found myself down at Pier 2. If you ever make it to Kaohsiung, you definitely need to check this place out. Pier 2 used to be an old warehouse district for the port, but the once bustling industrial center has since been revitalized into a cultural and art district featuring a number of shopping areas, pop-up shops, art displays, and restaurants. Kaohsiung's beer scene is certainly lacking, but Pier 2 hosts Xiamen Brewing. When I initially showed up there, they were hosting an event, so I ended up just grabbing some beers and continuing on my adventure. That's where I found one of the most refreshing and interesting beers that I've ever had.
Whoa. That is really sour. Damn. I was not expecting that to be that tart and sour. But kind of refreshing. Actually really refreshing, especially when it's this hot.
The next day I made my way back to Pier 2 to catch a ferry over to Cijin Island. The ferry makes frequent trips back and forth, and it only takes about 10 minutes. On the way over to the island, I ended up meeting up with a Japanese YouTuber who makes some pretty cool travel content. I'll put a link in the description. Once you arrive on the island, you're welcomed by a market and a plethora of shops. Continue down the main road until you get to the beach. It reminds me of the little shore towns where I'd spend my high school days with beach bars and surf shops. Great place to go if you want to have a nice relaxing day at the beach and maybe just catch some waves, if that's your thing. As you make your way through the walking path, you'll find various statues and art displays. Continue your walk through the Tunnel of Stars until you finally exit into a beautiful natural area surrounded by foliage with ocean waves crashing on the shoreline. As you continue along the path, you'll find yourself taking a nice long walk through lush green area full of foliage. When you get to the end of the path, make sure you make your way past all the people fishing until you find some stairs. You can't miss it. As you head up the stairs, you'll find that the path splits. I highly recommend you make a turn to the left. After a few minutes of walking, you'll find yourself at Taihu Fort. This fort used to guard the north entrance to Kaohsiung Harbor and was built in the 18th century. You're free to explore the barracks and the command post. As you walk along the wall, you'll get amazing views of not only the island, but of Kaohsiung as well. Once you leave the fort, you'll continue along another short path until you reach a lighthouse. After the signing of the Convention of Peking, the harbor was opened to foreign traders in 1863. With the increased harbor traffic, the British constructed this lighthouse at the top of the hill. This place is a great spot to get some great views as well as take a nice rest stop. I explored the island a little bit more before making my way back to the mainland to grab a bite to eat. The sun was starting to settle, so I went for a nice long stroll along Pier 2. It's beautiful at night, and the buildings light up, which gives it a completely different experience. At this point, I went up to meet with my new friend that I met in Tainan. I didn't record a whole lot, but we just went out for some drinks. In the morning, I met up with my friend to grab a bite to eat. I checked out his fermentation shop where he makes some excellent food, and we cruised around the city on a scooter. I still don't get who came up with the idea of scooters doing a jug handle just to turn left.
This is actually really stupid.
After a while, we parted ways and I caught a bus down to Kenting for one of the main highlights of the trip, scuba diving. I ended up at a little beach town outside of the national park which had a very lively night market. I needed to get around, so I ended up renting a scooter, which was very affordable and an excellent way to move around if you don't have a motorcycle license. I took a class with a company called Dive Pro, and I won't go into too much detail as there are already some great videos out there, but this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I definitely found a new hobby that I'm going to pursue further. The instructors were excellent, and I got to see some amazing things. There was an excellent variety of coral and sea life, and I still can't get over the sea turtles. They're such beautiful creatures, and I'm glad the Taiwanese government has taken great strides to restore the once dwindling populations. When the class was over, I got caught in the rain, which made for an adventurous ride back to my hotel, where I ended up spending the rest of the evening chatting with new friends and exchanging stories. As you may have guessed, mine mostly consisted of scuba diving. I wish I had had more time to explore Kenting, but my time was running low and I needed to get back up to Taipei. But I still had a little bit more time to make one more day trip up to Jiufen. Jiufen is a picturesque town tucked away atop the northern coast with amazing views of the ocean. You can explore the beautiful old street filled with shops, restaurant, and the iconic tea house where you can grab a bite to eat with the backdrop of beautiful scenery. Now, many have said that this town is the inspiration for the beloved film Spirited Away. However, the director has mentioned on many occasions that is not the case. There just happens to be a coincidental appearance. But when you look behind me at this little tea house, you can definitely see why people make that connection. You could easily get lost here exploring the small side streets and alleys. It's absolutely worth a day trip, but I recommend going early in the morning before it gets too packed. And situated just below the town is the beautiful Golden Waterfall, which certainly is a sight to see. Now, if you want to get away from the crowded areas, you can always come down to the Golden Waterfall. It's water that's been stained with copper and sulfur. A lot of people thought that it was the result of the old gold mining here when the Japanese were occupying the area. However, that isn't the case. These are all natural metals. You still don't want to go into it because it is toxic. If you walk down the road, you'll eventually find yourself at Yin and Yang, where the Golden Waterfall meets the Blue Ocean. Just keep in mind that there aren't a lot of buses heading back up to town, so you may be waiting a while. With that being said, it was time to head home. I love the time here in Taiwan, and I can easily say that this island is highly underrated. I met some amazing people and had a wonderful time, and I can't wait to come back and explore everything that this place has to offer. Thanks for watching to the end. I'm still making walking videos, but I've decided to put those on another channel. I'll leave links to those videos in the description. Feel free to leave a comment. I always appreciate the feedback, and if you subscribe, I would certainly appreciate it. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.